Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Swanton Village Board of Trustees for Monday, August 10th, 2020. First of all, would you rise and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is agenda review. Do we want to change it at all?
I just have to add one personnel on executive session.
Personnel on the executive session, okay.
Please.
Okay, item number 4 is public comment. No public comment? Something different than last month. Item number 5, approve and accept the minutes from Monday, July 27th, 2020. I have a copy of those in your packet. What's your pleasure?
I'll move they be approved.
I would second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve and accept the minutes from Monday, July 27th, 2020 meeting. Any discussion?
Good job, Diane.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. If not, all those in favor of approving and accepting the minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's carried. Item number 6, approve and accept the village warrants through Friday, August 7th, 2020. You have a copy of those in your packets. What's your pleasure on the warrants?
I would move that we accept the warrants 67 through 69.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to approve warrants 67 through 69. Any discussion on warrants? Questions?
I just wondered about 81,598, Primer and Piper, $1,100. What'd they do for us lately?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but we did have a discussion with them on a lot of the issues we had last meeting, but it wasn't $1,100 worth.
I was gonna say another 10-minute phone call.
No, I don't. Could be Lynn called them for advice on stuff.
Okay. No other questions, Mr. President?
Okay. No other questions? All those in favor of approving and accepting the village warrants, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's carried. Item number 7, our Economic Development Coordinator update. Elizabeth.
So I just had one that I wanted to make sure that you were all aware of. So if you recall, we hired a consultant, DHB, to do the downtown scoping study. This is a save the date. September 17th will be the local concerns meeting. We don't have a time, we don't have a location, but it will be September 17th. My suspicion is that it will be in the evening, which makes sense because people work during the day. But more information will become available, but I just wanted to let folks know, particularly I know Chrissy, you're very interested in it. Neil and Reg, will kind of need to be there because they're on the committee. So September 17th is the first local concerns meeting for the downtown scoping study to address the traffic patterns from the first street, Grand Avenue intersection, all the way kind of almost to the bridge. So stay tuned. That's the first kind of announcement on that as we move that project forward.
How many meetings are there to collect more data?
Well, so there'll be the local concerns, and then there will be a couple, 3, in order for them to refine what the final master plan will look like.
Again, I'm hoping for a solution, not just a recap of the problems.
Yep, it will be, by the time we're done, what they typically do is have 3 scenarios and then we will have a meeting, and then we'll pick all or parts of the three. We'll pick either a scenario, or more likely we'll pick the best bits of the three, and then they'll come together and put that as final, kind of the final master plan is usually the way that works. So, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it. And just so you know, we have, the select board did, the select board did choose a consultant for the MVU design phase, which will be Lambrot and Dickinson, somebody a little different. But they did a really nice job on the presentation, so that is moving forward. And I would expect that you will hear an announcement shortly on the Lake Street offshore storm consultant as well.
Is there any chance that the sidewalk can go behind the town garage instead of in front of those houses?
According to the scoping study that's already done, those people who expressed an interest wanted it along First Street, so that's the path. So
And the people are okay with it?
we had multiple
Man,
meetings.
my buzz is no.
We had multiple meetings, and that was just at the edge of me coming in.
Okay.
There were multiple meetings, and yeah, they wanted it along First Street. So that's the path.
Okay, September 17th. Stay tuned, right?
Time to be announced. In the evening, I can tell you that much. I'm expecting 6.
And then location.
And the location TBD, maybe here, it'd be nice, weather permitting. I won't be there, so, I don't. But we'll have everything planned out before.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
It's a Thursday.
Yes,
Okay, so then you're all set then?
I've got,
For now.
for
Okay,
now.
next item, Swanton Village PD update. Chief Stell, want to enlighten us?
Yeah. Give you a little update. So just so, not that any of this is new, they send out the weekly report, but for the month of July, we responded to and handled 182 complaints in the village. We also had 14 traffic stops that resulted in traffic warnings throughout the village. We had another 8 traffic stops that resulted in 8 traffic citations. The areas of most of these offenses that were apprehended were Canada Street, First Street, Spring Street, and Grand Avenue, and one in North River. So primarily the streets that we saw, based on our studies, the majority of the speeding violations on Canada, Spring, Grand Avenue, First Street. And then out of that, there's potentially $1,441 in fine that will come back to the village. If the people pay their traffic tickets.
Things stand out as far as oddities or hotspots other than traffic?
No, I mean, pretty much things are the same. We have a few kids that we've been dealing with for repetitive minor quality of life issues. I think we've got most of that squared away now with those folks.
And the other question I had was the police contract with the town. Is that up this year?
It's already been, we've been doing year to year.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're not missing anything.
It's been done year to year. We have not done another long-term one other than the first one we've done. We've just been happy with our services and do it each year.
I only bring it up because I know the community has changed.
I have a question. This week on my street, Galloport, there was a dog issue. And patrolman was there, and he told the person on my street that had the question, the issue, that the police had written under no restriction on the dog issues. It was a dog catcher, and now we don't have a dog, we don't have an animal control officer. Is that true?
So the only thing we can enforce from a dog issue is if the dog is biting somebody or excessive barking and noise. To take a dog, a stray dog in possession, we don't have the authority to do that. Only
This was an aggressive
the town animal control officer has that ability.
Well, this was an aggressive dog issue, I guess.
Yeah, and if the aggressive dog hasn't bitten anybody and it's back in that person's house, again, that falls back to the town animal control officer.
Which they did appoint someone today.
They did today.
Yeah.
You have one, yes.
Yeah, so they do have an animal control officer now.
That covers it, thanks.
Yeah, unfortunately, our hands are tied with that a little bit.
Anybody else have any questions for the chief? All good. Okay, thank you, chief. Next item on our agenda this evening is to discuss and sign our VEPSA Vermont Support Agreement Extension, Phase 1 transmission. I'm sure you can enlighten us on this subject.
I'm hoping Ken can
Yeah.
enlighten us.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is Ken Nolan from VEPSA,
The general manager.
the general manager of VEPSA.
Thanks, Joey.
He's the general manager.
Good evening. Good to be back again in Swanton. It's quality time here. Before we get into phase 1, Rich asked me to talk a little bit, a few minutes about what PEPS is doing. We're just starting our budget process for FY21. So we've got a few steps taken, and some direction not really coming out of that might be of interest to you. So we start every budget process in June with a retreat for the board and the staff. We held that at the end of June. Had most of the board members attend this year with a combination in-person, virtual effort. Coming out of that, we've set 4 sets of priorities. One around financial stability for both us and the members. And the key takeaway from that aspect is we're trying to take steps to increase load for all of the electric utilities. So that's a combination of promoting electrification, so heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, electric vehicles, which also meets the regulatory requirement. We're also taking steps to get more active on economic development. So we're in the process of talking to the board about putting a key accounts person together that would work with the folks in your town and the electric department, be more active in helping people decide when they're evaluating upgrades to their facilities or new companies looking at locating. If we can get them to come in and be as efficient as they can and look at the electric loads versus burning fossil fuels, that could be a benefit to both the community and the electric department. So we wanted more active on that front. We also focused on what we call policy leadership, so that's more of the legislature, congressional delegation, regulators, really trying to promote the local community views. What we're finding is the state's very quick to consider all utilities to be the same, and they don't really recognize that municipal utilities are more governmental entities. You look at the world a lot different than Greenhouse Power or even the co-ops do. So we're actively positioning ourselves to keep raising that image with folks and really promoting the municipal view of the world in front of the legislative policy leaders. Third, we're focused internally on the organization. So continuing training. The staff is getting closer to retirement age, and as you're probably aware, it's pretty hard to find people in the electric utility business these days. So we're starting to do the transition planning, looking at how succession plan will work, and also training for the staff, trying to get people ready for the transition over in a few years. And new this year, the board of directors told us to focus on technology. So we're looking both internal to VEPSA and the kind of work from home, how do we make this work in a COVID situation, but also looking at technologies that would be deployed at each of the members. So broadband has become a huge topic.
I think we've tried for a couple of years to keep the electric utilities on the outside of that. Be helpful but not be responsible for it. That's been a pretty difficult conversation. The state's really coming around to the viewpoint that electric utilities are the way to get broadband deployed. So we're getting more and more pressure. We've been acting as the advocate for the municipal utilities in those conversations and working with Velco, the transmission company for the state, and some other private companies to figure out how to bring federal money to Vermont and get broadband deployed without the electric utilities really taking responsibility for the retail customer side of things. So that's taking a lot of effort. The last piece is advanced metering, which I know I've been talking about here for a while. We're trying to do a program where all of the VEPSA member municipalities do metering together. Instead of everybody buying their own system, we would have one system that everybody can take advantage of, get the economies of scale. We spent about 18 months going through first an RFI process to try to figure out the qualifications for vendors. We're now in an RFP process to get pricing attached to that. And we're almost at the end. We're expecting that for the September board meeting for VEPSA, we'll be making a recommendation on which vendor to choose and starting the contract negotiations. So if that timeline holds, which is pretty likely it will at this point, we'd be looking to negotiate a contract in the fall, design the systems over the winter, and start deploying in the members that are really ready to go sometime mid to late spring. So we're looking at that transition and how to make the conversion. I mean, these projects tend to take 2 to 3 years from start to finish, so it's a long-term effort. But we're headed down that path at this point. Happy to answer questions on that before I get into the contract.
How is that meter different from a smart meter, or is that what it is?
Smart meter, advanced meter is kind of an interchangeable term. The big difference between typical meters that are used today and the advanced meter is the meter that's used today, you either have to read it by hand, or most utilities at this point have what's called an advanced meter reading, or AMR. That puts out a radio signal, but you have to drive a truck or walk by it to collect the data. Advanced meter infrastructure, or AMI, uses that radio signal and collector points, so you don't actually have to go to the meter. It sends the data back to a central location for you. So they're similar, but
is for a small system like ours,
yeah.
the added cost, from what I've read, and I could be wrong, the traditional meters last longer and they cost less. So the new meters give a lot of advantages to the electric company. You don't have to have a meter reader. You can shut off remotely. You can do some adjustments remotely. But how does that affect the user's bill? It seems to me like it's going to cause it to go up, not go down.
Yeah, we're going to have to look at a business case for each individual utility once we figure out which vendor we're going with. What you tend to find, though, is there are savings that you can get for the utility as a whole. I have yet to see anyone actually be able to reduce staffing by putting these meters in place. What you end up doing is having the same staff, but they're doing a slightly different job. So a meter reader, for example, might have to have more technological skills, because now he's troubleshooting a meter, not necessarily reading what the meter says. But you're still going to need that body. You'll save quite a bit of operational money on reconnect, disconnect, so move in, move out, being able to tell customers what their final bill is if somebody sells their house without having to go out and actually read the meter. That's proven. Most utilities that I've talked to have seen significant savings there from not having to run vehicles around town. The big benefit you see, though, is and now you're getting hourly data from every single customer in town. So you'll know the customer usage hour by hour and be able to redesign your rates. So it's not really a savings on the metering itself. you're right, that will be probably the same cost by the time you amortize it, or a little bit more. But if you can use those meters to redesign your rates so that the customers have incentives to use power less during the times that it's costing you the most, then you could actually see significant power savings over time. It doesn't happen right off, but as you train customers to know when the most costly times of day are, and you put the rates in place that incentivize them to use less, then you can actually see savings for the utility and for the
Do
customer.
you think the state or the utility board, or used to be the public service board, is likely to allow you to have flexible rates like that? So far, they haven't been.
They actually are flipping 180 degrees
Really?
right now. I was asked to speak last month at a day-long workshop to the Department of Public Service. So the Public Utility Commission is like the court, and the Department of Public Service is the prosecutor, for lack of a better term. They're the customer advocate. The DPS did a workshop last month specifically on how do utilities get to those time of use rates, or dynamic pricing they call it. So charging people more during the middle of the day when prices are high. They're also talking about putting in rates specifically for certain appliances. So if you own an electric vehicle, it'll have a separate rate from the rest of your house. All of that stuff is being discussed right now. But in order to do any of that, you really need something like this advanced metering in place, where you can track the usage on an hourly basis and be able to match the usage with the rates you're putting in place.
Is it as accurate or more accurate than our current system?
They're as accurate. So typical meters are about plus or minus 2%, regardless of whether it's mechanical or the new advanced metering. The thing the new advanced metering brings you is you get outage reporting. If somebody loses their power, you don't have to wait for them to call you. Every meter will tell you it's out. You get tamper notices, so if somebody's trying to mess with the meter, you'll get automatically reported on that. And there's a whole bunch of notices that there's something wrong with the meter. So a lot of the going out and reading the meter at the end of the month and finding out something broke, you'll pick those up a lot faster.
Will disconnects be done automatically from the office?
It can be. The wrinkle you run into there is if it's a disconnect or a reconnect, because you can shut the power on or turn it back off.
Mm-hmm.
If it's done at the customer's request, then that can be done very easily.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a shut off for non-payment,
It's different.
then mechanically it's the same, but there are some regulatory requirements that make it a little more difficult.
There's a deep backstory behind why VEPSA we chose to move towards AMR. I mean, there was pressure by the PUC. There was a lot of conversation about privately owned companies. If they're doing it, why can't we? And so, I mean, with Swanton being what we're the third largest publicly owned utility. So we're not as small as you think we are, but with public utility, we're third largest. But by going in the aggregate, it's strengthen the power of the numbers that we can get better pricing. We're also going to do water as well. So our water meters are low too, and they'll be AMI also.
3,600 of them, that's a lot.
What's that?
Said 35, 34, 3,600 of them, that's a lot of meters.
Okay. You got meters that are 30 years old, we're not getting accurate reads on water especially. So there's potential lost revenue there too.
It's on my list to ask, so I'm gonna ask now. Sometimes mine makes noise.
Your
Should it?
water meter?
Water meter.
Probably not. I mean, it's spinning with the, yeah, probably should.
Do you see them make noise if they get sand in them?
Well, that can happen. That's
Yeah,
all.
so your backflow sometimes, if it gets old, might let a little sand in there, and they make like a whistling sound.
It isn't stopping it, that's for sure.
So we tell the customers to take it apart, rinse it out. Right there.
Well, if it makes wakes me up, I'll let you. Okay.
Ken, you said AMI and AMR are sort of the same but yet different. Is AMI better? I mean, is that something that we should be considering instead of AMR, or?
It's a progression really, so some utilities are still doing mechanical meters, so you physically have to visit every single meter and read it. The next progression would be what's called AMR, so it's sending a radio signal every 20 seconds. And you gather the data by either walking by with a radio receiver or driving a truck. AMI is the next step up, which is essentially the same meters as AMR, except you're adding some more functionality as far as disconnect, reconnect. An AMR meter is just giving you data. You can't really control it in any way. And you don't have to send anybody to drive by the meter. It's going to send radio signals to a central point, and then either through cellular or fiber optic backhaul, the data gets brought back to the office. So you never physically have to go there unless there's something wrong. So most utilities around the country are now moving toward AMI. That's the latest and greatest. But Chris raises a good point. I mean, you really have to look at the economics of is it worth that extra investment for AMI to be able to do those controls and do the special rates versus putting an AMR as a discipline.
Right.
And we have to, everybody will have to look at that business case and make a decision for themselves. But Reg points out, I mean, we're getting a growing amount of pressure from the state to put in the AMI, which allows us to do rates that will promote some of these home-based technologies that we're trying to get people. So if you choose not to do AMI, at this point you're going to have to justify why you're not putting it in.
Right.
Where 5 years ago it would be you had to prove that it was worth it to put it in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ready for the phase one conversation?
We're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Try to keep this simple. So, back in the 1980s, most of the Vermont utilities signed a contract with Hydro-Quebec to bring power into Canada, called the Vermont Joint Owners Contract. And it was a big controversy at the time. The Cree-Indians from northern Quebec came down. They were fighting because Hydro-Quebec had flooded a lot of their territory in order to produce power to bring them. Most Vermont utilities, Swanton was one that was in that group, signed a contract, long-term contract to buy power from Hydro-Quebec. At the time that contract was signed, back in 1984, ISO New England didn't exist. We were operated under something called NEPOL, the New England Power Pool. And one of the hallmarks of that structure was anytime you bought power from someplace outside of your utility, you had to show a physical path between the person selling you the power and yourself. So all the utilities in New England, when they signed the contract to buy power, they also had to sign contracts for transmission to move the power from Quebec to their particular location. That's how the Highgate converter got built in the first place. It's 225 megawatts there. That brought most of the Hydro-Quebec power in, but there wasn't enough space in Highgate to bring everything. So 6 of the VEPSA members, including Swanton, ended up also contributing to this phase 1 line, which starts in Quebec. It kind of slices across northern Vermont, crosses into New Hampshire around Comerford, the St. John area, and then goes across New Hampshire and ends up in Massachusetts, where it ends. And then we had contracts in place to move the power from Massachusetts throughout New England, those power users. So that contract's been in place for 30 years. You've been paying support payments every month to Belco for the rates to use that line. However, in 2012, when that Hydro-Quebec contract ended, it was replaced by a new one. It now goes for another 20 years. Under the New England structure that's in place with New England, you no longer need to show a path for transmission. Everything is done financially. So the contracts and the transmission rates can now be set. So fast forward to today, you don't have a real physical need on this line. But there is a right under the contract to extend it for an additional 20 years. So it ends in November. In that original 30-year contract, there's a right to renew for another 20. Velco has been negotiating on behalf of all of Vermont to renew that contract. The discussion's been going on for about 4 years now. We finally have a contract that everyone agrees to, seems to be reasonable, according to our attorney, according to Velco's attorney. But you run into the question of should you extend? So the benefits of extending are the line's 30 years old, it's essentially fully depreciated. Your support payments are $100 a month. It's very tiny. If you retain rights to the line, ISO New England views that as a very beneficial access to Quebec. So under emergencies, they can call Hydro-Quebec and bring power in. Because they can do that, they give every utility that owns rights to the line a credit on your capacity bill from ISO New England. Something called the HQICC, or Hydro-Quebec Interconnection Bill. So every month, you're getting your portion of the line times the capacity price in New England for that month as a credit on your bill. Those credits themselves add up to several $1,000s a year. So you're paying $1,000-ish a year, you're getting back $4,000 or $5,000 a year in credits. We hadn't seen it until recently, but now we're also seeing third parties really interested in moving power out of Quebec into New England and New York. So there's private marketing companies now that are dealing with small hydro operators or solar fields in Quebec. The Hydro-Quebec doesn't want anything to do with it. In order for these third parties to bring power in, because they don't have a load in New England, they have to show a path. So they've been reaching out, trying to access our space, your space, for leases. And those lease payments, we've got 3 entities that are very actively talking to us, and the lease payments themselves are almost equal to the credits that we get for capacity. So, although you don't have a physical need to own the line anymore, you have an irrefutable right to extend for 20 years. We know that we're going to get the capacity credits for that line for the 20-year period, and those credits themselves are going to be about 5 times what you pay for support of the line. And we have an opportunity to lease it, which will almost double that money. So from a financial standpoint, our view is pretty much a no-brainer to continue on. We've asked to put the same packet together for the 6 members who have rights to the line. And are recommending to all of you that you extend, continue on with ownership. And then we would turn around and you get credits for the capacity for your power bill from VEPSA, and we would flow the lease revenues back to you as well. We'd aggregate all the numbers together, lease the space, and then we get credits back for each of them. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Happy to answer this.
Sounds like a really good deal. Is there any liability? I mean, wire replacement, poles, towers?
That was my question. What happens if something fails?
Yeah, so all of the utilities in Vermont should fail. Greenland Power, Vermont Electric Co-op, Stoll Electric, Washington Electric, and half of the VEPSA members are all owners in this facility. Part of the negotiation, or the reason it took 4 years to negotiate, is they have done full due diligence as far as condition assessment on poles. They've got a capital plan laid out as to what they perceive for upgrades over the 20-year period, so there's a budget built in for capital improvements. That is a risk. If something catastrophic happens and they have to rebuild and it's not covered by insurance, then those costs would flow through. Our view in looking at this, that risk is fairly minimal compared to what, I mean, have to cost 10 times your support payments in order to break even.
And that transmission line, I know few years ago, when there was discussion about the wind towers in St. Albans, and one of the discussion points was the fact that transmission lines couldn't handle the load. Is any of that in the wording as to, if there's added, capacity or load?
If you have, well, a couple of things. So this line is kind of unique because it's not part of the integrated grid, which is what you ran into with the wind. If you have to upgrade it, then basically everybody covers that cost. This is a point-to-point transmission line, so it goes from Quebec to that Massachusetts, Monroe, Massachusetts. It's not really included in the tariff, so what the contract says is you can upgrade it, but that upgrade has to be mutually agreed to between all the parties. Pretty unlikely to happen.
Yeah. So we would have a say if there was any sort of.
Yeah, Velco would have a big say.
Yeah.
They own the Vermont portion, and they have rights to about 10% of the overall facility. The line carries 2,000 megawatts right now, so upgrading it would be a significant effort.
Yeah.
And not something I think anybody wants to do with the present permitting environment in particular.
One other question, I think the timing, if we go another 20 years to bring us out to 2015 beyond?
Yeah, it would, it ends in November of 20, so it would take you to November of 2040.
Oh, okay, so I thought we had already signed a contract for 20 years.
You signed an original one for 30 years
Okay.
in 1984.
Okay,
The next 20 years would begin in November of this year.
okay. That clarifies something.
So you're looking for a motion for us to support the agreement?
Yeah, so because this is so complicated, it involves multiple utilities in New England, there's a whole series of documents that we need. The action we'd be looking from the trustees would be to approve the contract and to authorize someone, ideally one person, to sign on your behalf. Because we believe the contract's done, but the lawyers are still kind of going through making sure the T's are right and the right wording is in there. So we've been told that the contract terms will not change, but they may need someone to process further documentation once they get the final package together. So we'd like to have just one person authorized to sign on behalf of the village, so if we have to do any other paperwork, they can do so without having to get the board back together again.
Okay, then I would make the motion that Swanton Village agree to this phase one contract and that we sign the village manager, Reggie, with the authority to sign.
Would that be all right? There's not a conflict of interest deal with? Okay.
No, doesn't have, because I'm the chairman, no.
This contract doesn't actually run to VEPSA, it runs between Swanton and Velco.
Alcohol?
Okay, just wondering.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion's been made. Motion's been made and seconded to support the phase one agreement through VEPSA Vermont and authorize village manager Reg Bello to sign such documents. Does that
Yes.
sound right? The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any more discussion? Questions for Ken? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's carried.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Can I ask Ken a quick question on a different subject?
Follow up, yep.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know. He's far enough away. he can't. I just wondered how, with this year, with the crazy year and the high demands and not much water, is Project 10 paying for itself?
Project 10 is doing pretty well this year. It's been run a couple of times. It's been a really bizarre year, because we had
Yeah.
loads drop off. Swanton didn't see it that much, but we had some members who loads dropped 50%. We had others who, mostly residential, loads were up 4 or 5%. Overall, New England's been down about 10%, give or take, through the summer. It's bouncing back now as the economies open up. So even though it was hot, we didn't really see a huge load increase this year. So we haven't seen Project 10 run very much until the last couple of weeks, when we've gotten like the 4 days in a row, 90 degrees. Then it ran for, I think, 5 or 6 hours on Saturday and Sunday of all times. It was kind of strange. But the answer to the basic, is it paying for itself? Yes.
Good.
Makes not so much money when it runs, but we get paid through the capacity markets and the reserve markets, which essentially they're paying you for insurance, so it's there and operational if they need it. And between those two payments, it's been bringing in quite a bit more than cost at this point.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we are concerned about next year, because the capacity market prices are dropping. We know what they're gonna be for 3 years in the future, and the next 2 years are the lowest. So we're taking steps now in the budget process to bring the cost side down to match it up with the revenue. And after that, we should see it go back up again, and we'll be in good shape.
Well, what drives us crazy is the wholesale cost of electricity. There's so much of it around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, the solar that's getting put into the markets right now is really wreaking havoc. You're seeing, because so much of it is like net metering, it's behind the customer meter, it doesn't show up in the wholesale market. So you're seeing between natural gas bringing it all-time lows and all the solar that's coming into New England, and you're seeing average prices now 2 cents a kilowatt hour. It's really low. So
Yeah.
if you're on the buying side, it's great. If you're on the side where you have enough generation or more generation than you need, then it's really challenging right now.
Again, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Ken? Thank you. Glad to see you again, Ken.
Yes, too.
And,
Hopefully your night's not too long.
So far, so good.
Not bad. Did we vote on that? I think we did.
Pardon?
Did we vote on my motion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, next item on our agenda this evening is any other necessary business. Anybody would like to say anything under that subject?
One quick.
Don't all jump at once. So.
I've got nothing tonight.
My post office project, I've heard nothing. Has anybody heard anything from anybody? I'm gonna write them another letter, I
Haven't heard anything.
guess. That's all.
But just got a couple of things.
Okay.
The hydro maintenance got done Thursday afternoon.
Office.
Usually we schedule the week
Post
off.
office project.
Everything got done ahead of time. We fired back up Thursday afternoon, and right off produced about 9.5, almost 10 megawatts.
Can you repeat that, please?
The maintenance got done a couple days ahead of time. Set up Friday, was done Thursday afternoon, and right off we're producing like 9.8 megawatts.
Nice.
So we caught the second day of the rain.
Oh,
We had come
perfect.
through from the tropical storm IASIS. We say ACES.
Yeah.
We got that, and Paul Nolan was up Friday with basically our team to help relicense. So, we're going in collaboration with Eva's firm as well. And so they had a visit with some of the Fish and Wildlife A&R on Friday as well with our consultants. And basically Ken said we're ahead of the schedule right now for our relicensing. Because we keep good records, keep track of a lot of stuff. So basically whenever a request is made by us, it's there immediately. Scott's doing a good job helping. Obviously when he came on, he's really into the record keeping part of it. He's kept very good records.
Who were the 4 or 5 young folks taking pictures?
You can.
Have a safe
Thanks,
trip.
Ken.
Take care. There were 4 or 5 young folks taking pictures at the dam in Highgate, and also taking, same folks were taking pictures of the Lower Swanton Dam as well.
Those are our consultants.
Okay.
There's 3 ladies and 1 gentleman, and don't ask me what their names were.
Yeah,
I don't
as I
remember
say,
the-
it was
I
4 or
don't remember
5.
the business that they were representing, but
Yeah. So,
they're trusted and true from Paul's standpoint,
okay.
and all from the state. They're not from other Massachusetts or outside. They are state people.
Perfect.
So you're getting consultants we're getting our consultants that know the state of Vermont's rules, which is beneficial.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else? I'd like to reiterate what Adam said at our last meeting, the sidewalks and the landscaping look great, and we're almost finished down on, down in front of the TD Bank.
York.
The old TD Bank, yeah, York Street.
That's gonna look nice in that
Yeah.
area.
Is that gonna be resurfaced?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the paving project was there. It's Church Street, section of Church Street, York Street, and we're gonna replace the water line going into Depot.
Yep.
So that's gonna get replaced with an 8-inch. Right now, there's an old 2-inch actually supplying that area. So we're gonna hydrant on the end, and then that area would be taken care of. I think there was one other section he was doing as well.
Well, good. Forward progress.
There you go.
Okay, if there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss customer account, real estate, and personnel.
I'll make that motion, and we go into executive session at 7:47 to discuss customer accounts, real estate, and personnel.
I'll second it.
The motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, we're in executive session. Okay, we're coming out of executive session. We just had a discussion about the 3 items I told you, customer accounts, real estate, personnel. No decisions were made, and I think if that's all we have this evening, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn this regular meeting of the Swanton Village Board of Trustees from Monday, August 10th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion is carried. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too.